Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of the Whisky Diaries. We're here live at Lagavulin in Islay, part of our whisky tour series around Scotland. This is an incredible distillery, literally my number one whiskey. I've been trying to get to this distillery for years now. I am so happy to be here and it did not disappoint. The trip, everything around Islay, everything to get to Islay, the ferry, the drive through Scotland makes this finally getting here so much sweeter. To quote Parks and Rec, I can see why Nick Offerman and Ron Swanson love this distillery so much. It's absolutely stunning. We're standing here at the pier. There's literally seals flopping around here. I just cannot explain how good this distillery is and being here. So anyway, like always, we're going to go through very little of the story. We're going to go through the tour of what makes this distillery special, the facts of the distillery and how they make the whiskey, and why Lagavulin is so special and such a great whiskey. Now, a little bit of history. They've been making in Lagavulin, in the Lagavulin Bay here, they've been making illicit whiskey since the 1600s. Now, they used to basically do it illegally and store it, and just basically by hiding in the church, by hiding it in funeral casks. They got around the taxmen for about 200 years. Eventually they caught on to them, and in 1816 Lagavulin got created and basically got made as a legal distillery. A couple of interesting facts about Lagavulin in itself is, until the 90s, the only reason why Lagavulin survived is because they were making whiskey for a blend that is a white horse whiskey blend. If they didn't do that, they would have gone broke and the distillery wouldn't have been made. And this is actually a fact that they mention a lot of times through the tour. The other interesting fact is that I think a lot of people know, but if you don't know, Laphroaig sued Lagavulin back in the 70s or earlier than that, in the beginning, while Lagavulin and Laphroaig were actually being made, one of the brothers or cousins, nobody knows, sued Lagavulin because Lagavulin was stealing water to recreate the formula or the recipe that Laphroaig was using. The tour guide, nobody really knows. She said that nobody really knows in Islay what actually happened, or who sued who, or what actually happened, but it's a very interesting fact. Now, the tour guide name was Bev. She's been working at this distillery for 3 years. She was born in Islay, born and bred, so she knows her stuff, and she was really helpful. Any questions that we wanted to ask, she responded, and she said that she was happy to answer all the questions. That is always something very important to take on a tour. And the more whiskey distilleries that you do, the more you realize that sort of attitude is actually what makes the tour better. Now, going into the production of the whiskey itself, all the barley gets delivered to Port Ellen, malted to specifications. ppm is about 36 ppm. So if you don't know what ppm means, is part per million, or parphenols per million. So that's how they measure how much basically smoke goes into a whiskey. Now, in Islay, peat is not protected, considering compared to Orkney or Ireland, where there's a lack of peat. The reason why is because 80% of the island is actually made out of peat, and apparently peat grows at 1 millimeter a year. So for what Bev said, that they have enough peat to make whiskey for another 25,000 years, which is great. I still think that eventually the peat will get protected, because it takes about 3,000 to 4,000 years just to make new peat. But anyway, so all the malted barley goes to Port Ellen. They get it from Inverness, the west coast, and sometimes from the main continent, basically from Denmark. They're using a lorette type of grain, which is great. A lot of distilleries are using that again. And as you can see also, since we're live, the beautiful weather of Islay started raining out of nowhere. It was sunny literally 2 minutes ago. Anyway, going back to that, once the barley comes into the shop, they mill it. The mill is, like many distilleries, is a porter's mill. They installed that in 1963. They do 4 mills a day, so the mill runs 4 times a day, producing 5 tons. So they make it basically 24. They say that 24 tons of barley arrived every day. They say 120, 130 tons of barley a week. The grist is a very standard type of grist, 20% husk, 70% grist, and 10% of flour. After that, the mash, they put it obviously into the mash tun. Interesting fact, they only do 2 waters. The mash tun was built in 1996 and is a fully automated mash tun. She did a lot of comparisons to Kaolila, but we are going to get to Kulila eventually, so we'll do a review then and we'll compare it to Lagavulin because they're owned by the same company. Now it's a stainless steel mash tun, pretty straightforward. The first water is 65 degrees, the second water is 85 degrees. All the rest, the leftovers actually get given to cattle farm. We do not know if they're going to do a biogas plant anytime soon, but I doubt it. I think they're going to just stick to that in the mainland. The wash bags, they have 10 of them. 6 of them are actually from Canadian pine, that is all the way from the 70s. They just did redo 4 of them, which are with Oregon pine. The interesting fact about this, and the reason why I mentioned this, is because the other 4 ones that got basically refurbished, they gave them the leftover wood, they gave it to Nick Offerman, as known as Ron Swanson. But Nick Offerman has been to Lagavulin about 8 to 9 times. He has carved furniture and did a lot of work out of the wash bags and just give them to the distillery, to himself. But it's an interesting story because Nick Offerman is actually heavily involved with Lagavulin. As you know, there's 3 releases, all 11-year-old. They're about to release the 3rd one that is going to come out in the next couple of months. It's a very short fermentation, which is very interesting because a lot of distillers take pride in they do 72, 82, 106 or whatever it is. They do 55 hours of fermentation, which is actually really little. After that, the ABV comes at 8 to 9% ABV as well, which is quite low compared to other distilleries. Like in Balvenie, for instance, they were adamant that if anything goes under 9.5, they will be worried. So obviously different methods, each distillery is unique. The stills are absolutely beautiful for me. They're really fat, beautiful copper stills. They have a really narrow angle on lowering basically, so a 45-degree angle facing downwards. This will produce a very heavy spirit compared to other distilleries that they have like if you go to Gardu, they take pride that the arm is actually facing upwards, which produces a lighter spirit. They have 2 wash stills and 2 spirit stills. Their wash stills are 10,500 liters each, and their spirit stills are 6,000 each. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting, and maybe I don't know enough about distillations, or maybe I didn't understand what they were saying, but from previous distilleries, we understood that the percentage of the heart that they get, the actual liquid that goes into the barrels, usually varies between 13 to 20% depending on the distillery. Now Vev was insistent that they actually get about 50%. So they said that 25,000 liters of wash goes into the wash stills, and after all the distillation and after everything is done, they actually barrel 12,000 liters. So that's about 50% of all liquid goes into. The reason why they say this is because apparently they re-put the heads and the tails through the distillations again. I didn't get a really good clarification on this, but apparently they use a lot of the liquid and they're very efficient on the style of distillations that they do. They produce 3.2 million liters a year of spirit, which is a fair bit. All the spirit gets put into tanks and gets sent to Glasgow. They do have a 6,000 barrel warehouse in Port Ellen and another 7,000, I believe it's 7,000 here in Islay itself, but most of it goes to Glasgow and they basically barrel it and bottle it in Glasgow. It's similar to Talisker in that way, and I'm assuming it's just because a lot of the whiskies that go that Diageo produces, they go to blends like Johnny Walker and stuff. So it's a big production. Now, basically after this tour, we finished with the stills, and then we actually got taken out to a tasting room in which we tasted 3 whiskies. 2 of them are the ones that you can get, and then we tasted one of that is just distillery only. The first one was an 8-year-old that was created in 2016 for the 200-year anniversary for Lagavulin. It was supposed to be a one-off, but people really loved it, so they started making over and over again. It's basically 48% ABV, American oak, and then which is a refill American. Now, secondly, we tried the Distillers Edition. That is a 14 to 16-year-old heavily charged bourbon casks, finish in PX cask for 6 months. 3 to 6 months. I got corrected these a few times, so it's 3 to 6 months repurpose barrels. Now, the third whiskey that we tried is a 12-year-old that is distillery only, and it's 57.7% ABV. It was a whiskey festival release. You can only get it at the distillery. This was American oak cask and finished in a 2-year-old virgin cask. All of the whiskeys were delicious. The distillery's edition obviously is one of my favorites as well. Sorry, I got distracted as well. I got a seal right there in front of me having a look at what we're filming. It's actually quite cute. It's very interesting. As I said, we're live. So anyway, the interesting part about this one as well is that once we finished the tasting, we decided to also do a second tour that is called the warehouse tasting. So the original tour that we did is a classic distillery tasting. They take you with 16 people around. It's actually quite good. It's not too bad. It feels a little bit crowded at sometimes, and it's not as good as having your own unique distillery, but it's still manageable. The warehouse tasting was done by Ian MacArthur. MacArthur has been working at the distillery for 52 years. Before that, he's been working at Port Ellen for 13 years. He was a character, incredible human being. He knew everything that there is to know about whiskey, and just very good Scottish humour, good, excellent value. And to be honest, when they take you to this warehouse tasting, which is a different tasting, whether you have to book them separately. So you got the tour and then you got the warehouse tasting. Now, the warehouse tasting is basically they take you to the warehouse and make you taste whiskies out of the barrel. But when we first got into the room where you meet everybody, there was 40 people. There was 40 of us, which seemed really crazy. And we're like, okay, so we're going to go 40 of us into a warehouse and just taste whiskies. But Ian actually made the tour. It was crazy. There was 40 of us sitting around 5 barrels, and Ian just ran us through, made us feel like we were basically just all a family. He ran us through everything. So I'll tell you most of the things that we tried. There was 5 barrels. There was a port cask there was American barrel, a hogshead, a sherry butt, and a puncheon. The first whiskey was actually the 12-year-old from the festival, which we have already tried in the previous tour, so it's not too much of a problem. Then we got the 9-year-old that it costs from American oak, and you can actually see Ian just pulling it up, and those barrels are actually by this time it's a little bit empty, so you see him just trying to suck the whiskey out through the pipette. So anyway, so that was a 58% American oak, and the American oak was a second filled. It was awesome. It was all very fresh, very grassy. Then we tried the second barrel. Was supposed to be a second barrel, but it was actually empty. They ran out just on that tour, so instead of that, they gave us a new Lagavulin that is coming out that is a no age statement, and you can only get it from the distillery. This is 3 whiskeys married into together, so a 8-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old, coming at 58.5% ABV. And it's basically, after they married all the whiskey, they rested for 6 to 12 months just to make sure that they marriage together. Then we tried a 17-year-old sherry butt from 550, 49%, and finally we tried a 25-year-old that basically goes in any other place, goes to the bottle itself is 2,000 pounds, an incredible whiskey. So the tour in itself is awesome. It's 32 pounds or 37 pounds, they take you through everything, but to be honest, it was a lot better than we expected with 40 people. Ian made the tour, and we actually got a kick out of it. It gave us a lot of information about all the casks that they use, which is basically what we're telling you. They do a lot of sherry, a lot of Olorosa. They do most of the bourbons are basically American, but yeah, it was on a lot. It was great. If you've done too many distilleries and you don't really want to do another distillery tour, this is a great alternative just to sit down and try some Lagavulins and basically just enjoy yourself and hearing Ian talk. It was great. Otherwise, to be honest, it's worth doing both tours. We did them both and it was actually really good for us. We end up tasting a lot of whiskies. Anyway, so just to finish the video, as always, we're going to taste one of the whiskies that we picked for the distillery. In this case, we just released this week the 14-year-old that got aged for 5 years in brandy. This is basically a festival-only whiskey. Only 3,000 bottles ever made. So once this runs out, it runs out. So the brandy, basically, the whiskey is finished for 5 years in brandy seasoned hogshead. So hogsheads are about 500 liters, and then after that the whiskey gets finished in that. It's a beautiful packaging, very special. And then when you do the distillery tour, they give you something that is super cute. It's got a little enamel little cup that you can take with you. So just to follow that, we're gonna actually drink the whiskey on this one. So as I said, it's a finished in brandy casks, and then this is at 54.4% ABV. It's a really strong whiskey. Now we're gonna go like that one. I haven't tried this one yet. They don't give it to try it in the distillery, but you can buy it at the distillery. So we bought one of these bottles, which is delicious. There you go, a little Lagavulin cup. It's not as good as what you say from a Glen can, but look at where we are. I don't think we can't complain too much, to be honest. Yeah, well, definitely you get the DNA of Lagavulin on the nose, which is that smokiness, but it's not as iodine or crazy as Ardbeg and Laphroaig. It's just more like a mellow. I forgot to say as well, the whiskey goes, when they make the whiskey, where they smoke the whiskey, is at 36 ppm, but by the time it comes out of the distill as a spirit, it actually comes around 10 to 16%. So it's not a crazy smoky whiskey. Oh wow, that's very different to your 16-year-old or even to your 8. It's a lot of, actually it's a lot of freshness in the back of the palate. You get like some, almost like peaches or like nectar. So it's actually quite delicious. The ABV being 54%, it doesn't actually feel that strong, so it's actually quite mellow. Delicious whiskey, probably worth putting a little bit of water, but definitely worth getting a bottle off and enjoy with your friends. Anyway guys, I am going to keep enjoying this whiskey on this incredible view. There's seals, you get birds around, there's like a castle behind me, a dead castle. This is a beautiful space. The rain is gone, the wind has calmed down, and yeah, it's beautiful. Guys, definitely recommend it to make the trip down here. It's an incredible distillery. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Please let us know if you have anything else or anything you want us to talk about. Slàinte mhath, and we'll see you next time.